Leetcode is not useful for you. If you're using it to try and hopefully get a job, or if you're using it to advance your skills, there's a much, much better way. Now, don't get me wrong, Leetcode can be useful for some companies where the interviews that you take at these jobs are just bullshit interviews where they basically give you like these whiteboard problems where essentially they'll draw out a problem and will expect you to know how to solve this really complicated problem on the spot. And unless you've kind of seen it before by having done Leetcode, then you won't really be able to solve it as effectively as someone who has done Leetcode. In the real world, however, most interviews aren't constructed like this. Most interviews are simply just, here's a project, I want to see if you can do this project, and if you can do this project in a timely manner and efficiently and effectively, then you'll do well in the interview. In some cases, they may even watch your computer as you're doing this project, or it may be like a take-home project, but end of the day, you're able to use Google to figure out the questions that you have as you're trying to solve this problem. And that makes sense, right? Because that's exactly the type of stuff you'll be doing on the job. You'll be allowed to Google the questions that you have, and you aren't expected to kind of know all the answers to all the questions when they give you a problem. You're just expected to know how to figure out the solution to the problem as they come up. Every interview that I've ever had personally has always allowed me to use Google, and it's always been either a take-home project or like a little kind of project where they inspect your computer as you're kind of writing out the code just to see how you develop. It's never been like a high stress scenario where here's a problem and you're sitting there really confused and not exactly sure how to continue with the interview because you have never seen this problem before in your life. So if you shouldn't use Leetcode, then what should you use instead? Well, what I would do if I was starting again is I would watch a course or a few courses on the core fundamentals that you need to know within software engineering, within the field that you're applying for. For me, that's full stack web development. So it would be really necessary to know stuff like databases, networking, software design, stuff like that, as well as the languages and the frameworks and stuff that you'll be using to develop out these applications, like JavaScript, HTML, CSS, React, stuff like that. Beyond that though, beyond like watching just like a handful of courses that will teach you just the fundamentals of what you need to know, I would start trying to apply that into building a project in the area that you're trying to get a job for. So if it's for full stack web development, then I would develop a website, like a really basic website. If it was for game development, I would develop a really basic game. And after I built that first project, I would keep trying to develop more and more projects, getting better and better as I go. And what you'll find as you start to build these projects is that you'll have questions that you won't be able to find the answers to on a website like Leetcode. And you'll be able to Google these questions, figure out the answers to these questions as other people have come into relatively similar problems that you are currently facing. Your real resume isn't defined by your Leetcode ability, but rather your problem solving ability. How you could go about solving problems as they arise and how quickly you can overcome the problems as they come to you. Leetcode and sites like it aren't actually as important as a lot of beginning software engineers like to believe or are led to believe by other people in the field. While it can very much be useful to know some of the concepts, it's definitely not required to do like 200 Leetcode problems just to try and get a job. You tend to become better at alleviating problems as they arise by actually facing them in the wild, by actually discovering these problems naturally as you're trying to build out your own projects. And of course, as you Google the answers and overcome these problems as they arise. When you do that as well, they actually stick to you, like the solution that you figure out usually sticks and you remember it way better than if you were to just try and do some memorization ritual on a website like Leetcode, because you feel like that's important to know. And you do this over and over and over and over again. And this is like the process of learning, right? You build projects, you come across problems, you solve these problems, and you learn how to solve it for the next time so you don't actually run into that problem again. And then all of a sudden you've leveled up and you do that again and again and again and again till you get to a stage where you know a bunch of stuff and you know how to overcome problems before they arise because you've seen a whole bunch of problems in the past. All this to say, stop studying Leetcode if you're currently studying Leetcode or if you're thinking about going on a website like Leetcode, because the best learning that you could possibly get is by building out your own projects and solving the problems as they arise by Googling them and then becoming a better and better developer and keep doing that process over and over and over again. Thank you very much for watching, and remember, don't do what you feel like doing, do what is required.